Welcome back, internet friends. And in a previous video, I mentioned that I had found this list of questions. I made kind of a mistake years ago. I was doing a webinar and I said, hey, I told the organizer, I said, if you let people know ahead of time that they can send in questions early, I'd be happy to go through them, and that way we can make sure we answer all of their questions. Don't ever say that, because I expected that I'd get a couple of questions. I got like 38, I think, on the list. So be careful what you say. It worked out okay though, because a lot of many of the questions kind of overlapped or were around a common theme. So I was able to, it actually was good because I was able to kind of take a little time before the webinar and organize them into sort of collections of questions and address everything. But one of the questions that was in there that I don't think I've talked about really, and I've only gotten this question honestly a couple of times over the years, but the question was basically, I'm gonna paraphrase because they wrote a long thing. The question was basically, I want to get involved with gamification, but I don't like playing games. Now, I understand that's not even stated as a question, and that is kind of how they just kind of wrote a paragraph and was like, and that was kind of the summary of it. And it was interesting because most people, I would say, that I've talked to that get involved in game-based learning, gamification, any of that umbrella of things, part of the reason they get involved is because they've had good experiences with games, or they like to play games, or something like that. So having somebody just upfront say, "I don't like to play games," was interesting. And so my answer was, um, I think it's going to be difficult, but it's possible. I'm always hopeful, I guess. And so basically, what I told them was that I thought that the fact that they didn't like games was kind of missing the point. I'm sure I said it nicer than that, but right now, that's just kind of how it came out. Um, it's like when you're designing anything, whether it's gamification, learning, a chair, I don't care, whatever it is you're designing for the person who's going to be using it. So it really doesn't matter if you like games or not, because if the reason you're using it is that you're working with an audience that do like gameful experiences, if you are working in an environment that values this, interactive, collaborative, active learning sort of vibe, then that's what you need to be focusing on, is the audience. And the fact that you don't like games, I don't like all games. I mean, I play a variety of things, but I think we would all admit that, like, we all have preferences, and like I prefer this type of game over that type of game, and that's okay. That's fine. But if I'm designing, I have to be aware of that. And years ago, I don't see people reference him as much anymore, but I would say at least five or more years ago, there was a lot of discussion around player types, and people would quote Richard Bartle and the four player types, and then other people have spun off and done other models, that are I'd say more comprehensive, and have dug into it a little more. But Bartle's player types, and he had the four player types: the achievers, and the and the explorers, and everybody only talk about the killers, the clubs, the killers. Um, and but the point that people they kind of don't finish the sentence there, because even when Richard Bartle was talking about this originally, the piece of the sentence that people left off, he did sort of identify four player types. He never said, like, oh, you're 100% this or you're 100% that. He was talking about, there's a range of things, and some people tend to be more in one quadrant or another. But the part that people skip was that he was trying to explain to his game designers that they were designing for other people. and that they needed to design things that other people wanted to play. And the fact that they were designing something they liked, that was not going to be good enough, basically. And that's the part that people leave off usually when they talk about the player. They're just like, oh, there's 4 player types and, this and that, whatever. And that's fine to talk about the player types. Again, if you're understanding that they're not 100%, nobody is 100% in, well, I guess maybe somebody out there is, but generally people are, they have a preference in one direction or another, but they're not 100% in any of the categories. But the point was that you're designing for people and you need to think about what appeals and motivates and engages them. So that's back to my answer to this gentleman who, I don't like to play games. Can I, basically work in this space? And the other part of my answer to him was basically, okay, maybe you're just not going to even explore games. You just don't even want to do that part. Well, maybe you're really strong at some of the other components. They were in a L&D setting, so they were designing training. And I said, well, maybe your strength lies elsewhere. Maybe you're really good. Maybe he was really good with the technology, or maybe he was really good with the instructional design piece of it, or whichever. And I said, so maybe you need to partner with somebody. I said, that's a possibility. Maybe you find somebody who really likes the other part, really likes the gamification piece of it, but maybe they're not as strong in the parts that you're strong in. So maybe if you look at it rather than individually, but you look at it in terms of the team, that might be an option. So anyway, that's the thought for today. I stand by that answer. That was from several years ago, and I stand by that answer. I think I still think that it's much harder to work in a space that you really don't care for. And but it's possible. It's possible. And again, I would stand by my answer. I would suggest that he at least try to experiment a little bit with games, and he seek out partners, collaborators that can fill in the gaps for the parts that he's just not going to do or not interested in. All right, that's it for today. Let me know what you think. I could be wrong. I'm wrong a lot. I could be wrong about this one. So let me know. Be nice about it. But you can let me know if I'm wrong. All right. See you next time.